Hello, welcome to our webinar, which is looking all at SEO and PPC and how the two channels can work in harmony together, because we realise a lot of people will be running search campaigns and sometimes PPC and SEO can become disjointed. So we're very lucky to have the head of SEO, Tom Crewe, with us, and our head of paid media, David Berendt, to talk about how these channels work in harmony. This is a webinar that we have run in conjunction with ABTA very recently, had some very good feedback from the participants. So we are delivering it again today because we know that it's applicable for many, many other industries outside of travel. So without further ado, I'll hand you over to Tom and David, who will share the knowledge they have.
Thanks, Andy. Yeah, we've got a number of things to go over today, just to kind of give you some insight into what we do at Adido and what you could be doing with your own search campaigns. So step one is all about following the search trends. And what we mean by this is about how your users are searching, how that changes over time. So it's quite interesting to look at the holiday market at the moment in particular, because this is something that's seen a big shift in search trends changing over the past year. Obviously, due to the pandemic, we have seen foreign travel start to decrease, and UK staycations has seen a big increase. So this is interesting for us, because we can start to look at, okay, where should we be focusing our efforts at the moment? Where is the search? So we know that it's, things like Greek holidays, which usually would massively outperform UK staycations. No one's looking for that at the moment. The search trend has changed. So we're looking at staycations. But the key here is that we want to dig in a bit deeper than that. We don't want to just look at staycations. We want to look at where people are trying to stay in the UK. So you can dig a bit further. Here you can see that, again, normally London would be the more popular destination, but with the pandemic, Cornwall has become that more popular destination. So that's where you would want to then focus your efforts. And again, we want to dig down even further. So where in Cornwall? This is how you start to get an audience that are more ready to buy or to go on that holiday, because they know exactly where they want to go. So you want to have a look at these different areas. So what do you do with that information? Well, from an SEO perspective, during the build up to high search demand, that is when you should be increasing the intensity of your SEO campaigns. SEO does take a bit longer to see effect than PPC does. PPC, turn it on and it's on. SEO, we need to lay the foundations, lay the groundwork in there first. So during the sort of 2-3 month build up, when you know that when you're anticipating there's going to be an increase in that search demand, you would then be pushing your SEO efforts a bit harder. One of the first things that you need to be doing is making sure you've got the right site structure and the right architecture around each page. So here's just an example, a nice simple example of where we would then find St. Ives holidays nested nicely within the Cornwall section of the site amongst the other location holidays. So having that site structure is going to make it a lot easier for users to find this page, but also a lot easier for Google to find this page and for Google to understand the relationships between the different pages. We then want to dig a bit further than that and start looking at your search niches. So looking at more long tail queries. So I mentioned earlier about how we want to target users that are ready to purchase. Well, these users are even more ready to purchase. So if they're looking for dog-friendly holidays in St. Ives, that's a very specific search. So we want to build out landing pages for that are connected to that holidays in St. Ives page, which then boosts the rankings of not only that holidays in St. Ives page, but also the niche long tail pages themselves. And moving away from just the commercial landing page side of things, you can also then look at your content marketing efforts during that build up to the higher search demand. So if St. Ives is going to be the hot topic in 2-3 months time, like I say, you want to have your architecture there, make sure the landing pages are in place. Then you can start building out your content marketing efforts. So looking at the questions people are specifically asking online, what to do in St. Ives, where to eat in St. Ives, that kind of thing that actually has search volume. So these questions themselves can then drive traffic to your site. But not only that, but you can internally link to your commercially focused pages, the holidays in St. Ives page, and that will help to boost the rankings of that page. So it's kind of a win-win situation where you're getting the new traffic, but also increasing rankings in other areas of the site.
And then from a PPC perspective, I mean, the main thing for me here really is knowing sort of not only who to target, but when to implement different tactics and different strategies. There's no point in going for an educational piece trying to make people aware of the offering right at peak season, because at that point their decision's already made up. So really you need to start planning a little bit early. Now I use a little model, here we go, which is, it's no official one, but it's just a way of looking at things. And you need to be reactive. Now, obviously, there's a certain side of things with PPC to be proactive and look at where the trends are going, try to preempt some of that. But often, especially in times like this, when the changes can happen quite suddenly and can happen quite unexpectedly, you need to be quite reactive. So the first thing to do is really to research the landscape, have a look at what the long tail search terms. This is something that from an SEO perspective, you'll be able to glean quite a lot of information. You can back this up with the keyword planner tool within Google. So you can really research the landscape and have a look to see where you can expand. And then how are you going to target them? Well, the first thing really is to educate the users. There's no point in going in for an immediate hard sell on any holiday-based strategy if they're not aware of you, if they already have another brand in mind, another location. A hard sell isn't going to work unless they're already aware. So you need to build this up, and so build this up in the shoulder months as well, when you're not really expecting necessarily the high conversion rates, and educate them then. Then go for the automation side of things. Now, automated bid strategies are something that I wasn't personally a massive fan of, but as we've been testing this out, they really do work in certain respects, and you need to sort of apply a certain logic to them if you're going to get them to trigger in the correct way. So again, I will go into this later, but there are different bid strategies based on the different objectives. And one thing to always remember is that you can apply different conversions to different campaigns to really hone in what your main objective is step by step. And then one of the next things really is to consolidate both the plan with SEO, but also within PPC. So have a look at the account structure, make sure that it's scalable. Having one campaign with endless keywords is not going to allow you to really grow the account. So create an account structure which allows that growth, much in the same way as with SEO and the site architecture. That side of things doesn't just help Google, but it also helps you understand the data that's coming through. Otherwise, you can end up with sort of an information paralysis where there's so much there that you can't make sense of it. And then lastly, is quite simply to think. Have a think about the way that you use the channels. A lot of it, you could argue, has a certain degree of common sense, but there are other elements. So if we know that display typically isn't a high yielder of conversions, then don't opt for display necessarily as a conversion strategy. So just to have a look at the data and learn from it and sort of go back through this sort of process in almost a cyclical way as you go along. The next thing really is to make use of DSAs in this case. DSAs can be really, really helpful, but do need to be honed in. One of the things that we can do, and we have seen some really nice success with, is where you have the site architecture set up correctly and the SEO is well optimized on those pages, using DSAs based on the landing pages can really help pick up some of those long tail search terms which individually might have too low search volume for you to actually individually bid on. So it allows for certain growth in data, having a look at those search terms and then feeding that back through to the organic team to sort of see what's working, what isn't, and where there might be trends in growth that can be applied to organic. And then I mentioned before just the bid strategy side of things. So bear in mind what you're trying to do. If it's awareness, have a look at the target impression share, have a look at those viewable impressions. Traffic, again, so focus on maximize clicks potentially. Enhanced CPC can be useful. Personally, I think that maximize clicks tends to deliver better results from a purely traffic perspective. Conversions, see maximize conversions, you can set up certain cost per acquisition caps. either go for that for the efficiency side of things. If you're just trying to bulk volume those conversions, those leads, then maximize conversions, but of course they can, the cost of acquisition can grow outside of scope. So really it's sort of trying to work out what is your objective at the different stages of those strategies, and which bid strategy would work best for those. And this is something that I mentioned just before. Don't be afraid to use multiple conversions. There is no point in going for a completely blanket approach and having, well, and there might be a point depending on the account setup, but effectively you'll have far better results if you have multiple conversions and you target your different conversions by campaign. So the example I give at the bottom is that time on site can be an actionable goal. If you set that up as a particular goal and create and use that as a conversion base for a campaign purely on awareness to see how effective is it at educating the user, you can build it up from that perspective. So don't be afraid to be creative with your account. And then the bid strategies. Now, I appreciate that this is a sort of an interest over time, but just to give sort of an example of if this were a typical behavior in seasonality, you've got the quieter months and you've got the shoulder months and you've got the peak months. Where you have those quieter ones, you can, and this is a sort of a short-term example, when you have those quieter months, start educating, go for low-cost impressions, get that awareness building, then start to build up your traffic, get the search, build up the remarketing audiences as well as a potential, which can really help with the efficiencies with conversions, and then go back to conversion-based right at the peak periods when you're actually expecting those conversions. Now, of course, different industries, even within travel, have got slightly different structures. It might be that the peak months for search and not necessarily the peak months for conversions, people book well in advance, at which point apply this sort of logic in a scalable sort of way based on how your industry works. So if you have particular months, let's say that December, people are already trying to book in for the summer holidays, that would be your peak month potentially, rather than directly when there is a lot more search.
The key takeaways in this area, number one, laying those SEO foundations during the build-up, so anticipating the increase in search, and then looking at those niche long-tail queries, because that's going to be the lower-hanging fruit. And from a PPC perspective?
And from a PPC perspective, boost that PPC when there is sort of high search demand, and when there is really from your data to hand, where there is sufficient intent, really push the more aggressive strategies to hone in on those conversions. The other thing really is to be quite agile. I tend to prefer a broadly proactive approach, planning ahead and really sort of trying to get ahead of the curve. But where things are more fluid or dynamic, you need to be able to be quite agile. You need to be able to react to those different things. And this is where having your campaign set up in a structured, scalable way will really make a difference to being able to action things quickly and on the fly.
The next thing to look at is analysing the ranking changes. So now we're going to move away from how people are searching and look at more specifically how your site is performing. So the first thing you need to do before you can really do any analysis on how your site performs is to do your keyword research. Now, you should be doing this on a page-by-page basis, so assigning keywords to different pages, because that's going to give you a lot more structure in your targeting. And then you want to be adding tags. So in the purple there is what I would tag these keywords as. So if you use any SEO software, we use SEMrush, you can tag your keywords so that you can view different groups of keywords and different campaigns. So whether that be holidays, St. Ives holidays, dog friendly, whatever it is, you can break it down more and more so that you can then start looking at ranking changes and make your analysis and then make your plans off the back of that. So as an example, if you could see that your St. Ives holidays rankings were increasing, but you'd noticed some drop off in conversions for St. Ives recently, you might want to do some more digging to see, okay, well, why is this happening? So that would mean that if you had your keywords tagged appropriately, you could then filter by just dog friendly St. Ives, and you would see from this graph that there had been a drop in those rankings recently, and that is potentially why you are seeing that drop in conversions. It's always worth doing those safety checks. So if you see that area, dog-friendly St. Ives has dropped, check your dog-friendly keywords as well. So this is where you can have those higher level categories just to make sure that it's not the entire dog-friendly content on the site that has dropped and it's just isolated to St. Ives. All of this really means nothing unless you're looking at how it's impacted the website. So if it hasn't impacted the website, then okay, maybe it's not the highest priority. But if alongside these ranking drops, you're seeing traffic and conversion drops, that's when you need to take action. The first step in taking action is kind of doing those recovery checks. So there are a few things you can look at just to check that there isn't an actual issue on the site that has caused this ranking drop. I mean, we see ranking fluctuations all the time, but it's always worth, if you see a big drop, doing these sorts of checks. So retrace your steps and look back at what you've done on the site already. Have you made any changes to the content? If not, that's fine, but start looking at any indexing issues. So there are a bunch of more technical things you can check here, like your meta robots, canonicals, your robots.txt, your sitemap, and checking there's no 404 error on the page, and also making sure that no one's made a removal request in Search Console. So these are the areas that really affect indexing. So if you can check these and make sure that they're all as they should be, everything is indexed as it should be, then you know that it's not an indexing issue. And you can also look at other technical issues. So has any issues occurred with the mobile usability? This is a big ranking factor for Google. If that page is no longer mobile friendly, then perhaps it would lose rankings. Have a look at the speed. How does it compare on that page to other pages? And have a look if there are any errors in your schema. If an error in your schema has occurred, then again, that's another ranking signal to Google that might have dropped out. But if none of these are the issue, then it leads on to needing to optimize the page better, which we'll come on to a bit later. But I'll hand over to David on what you should be doing during recovery period.
Yeah, so with PPC, it's not always as much as we sort of play with it, PPC versus SEO type thing. PPC and SEO really do need to support each other. And in times when SEO has dropped and is recovering, we need to have a look at the PPC landscape and see what we can do to support it. So what are the keywords where the rankings have dropped? If we are currently bidding on these, what is the competitor landscape doing? Is there what volume worth chasing? In certain instances, they are such low volume, it might not be worth the support. And the other thing is really, what is the cost? Now, if they are very high CPC terms and the competition has really ramped things up, supporting SEO may not be cost efficient. So we do need to bear all this in mind. Now, the little graph I've got below, which is a mess, is what you can pull out of Auction Insights. So this is sort of a messier view of the landscape where the large black line is yourself and all of the other lines are your competitors. Now, campaign by campaign, ad group by ad group, account by account, this can change in shape drastically. But if you all of a sudden see that a competitor has really sort of ranked things up recently, it's something to bear in mind with association to the cost associated with it, whether we are going to be wanting to fully support SEO recovery at this point or try to build around it. So again, as mentioned, if it is cost viable, so fill in that organic downturn, even if it's temporary. If you know that there are certain terms, let's say that the dog-friendly holidays in Cornwall has fallen aside, for whichever reason, we would want to bid more actively on that to really sort of fill that funnel at the top, because we need to be up there visible where organic has dropped down. And the great thing with PPC is that, of course, you can turn it on and off. So this is potentially just a temporary fix. And once those rankings are restored, we can undo that, pause the activity, and let organic lift itself back up.
And once your PPC campaigns are in place, up and running, and sort of rescuing that traffic that you may be losing organically, this is where you need to be looking at your landing page optimization. This is where you can start to dig into that page and say, okay, what can we do to bring it back? This is our landing page optimization process, which I'm actually going to touch on a bit more later in the presentation, but this is just the time when you would start doing this. So the main point here is that your budget should be agile and reactive. You know, something happens organically, you change your PPC budgets. We've got sort of a rough diagram here to show about digital marketing spend. Now, this really is meant in terms of what you're spending if you are with an agency, but you could also see this as time, essentially, time being spent in these areas. So starting off, like I say, as you're approaching this high search demand, you would have more of your budget invested within SEO. But then as you hit the high search demand,
and then at the times when you've got that high search demand, this is when you really ramp up the PPC. There is a potentially competitive presence, which we'll have a look at later, but effectively where there's high search demand, and really it's not just the search demand, but it's also the intent behind it. This is when you need to be capturing those leads. If they're not going to be generating those conversions that you need, it's less efficient. So right now, this is where you put your high spend.
And then once you've kind of got through that high search demand period, you'll go back to a more level area of spending. And then if you see a rankings drop where you might think, okay, we need to push SEO higher, this is, like we say, we would actually push our PPC budgets up in order to catch any of that traffic that we're losing, still keeping some SEO turned on, and then gradually increasing that SEO spend as we see rankings start to recover from the work we're doing and bringing the PPC back down.
And with SEO, and there is always sort of a time delay between actions carried out and the results in the landscape. So this is really why this is more sort of like in terms of the spend allocation, sort of ramping up those bids and making sure that you are visible on those terms where efficient is valuable here. And then, as Tom has said, as soon as we see that the recovery process has taken place and SEO has picked up those rankings, we can pull back on the PPC and allow the campaigns to run more efficiently. And then lastly, the increase in competitor activity, as mentioned before, and this often sort of correlates to a certain extent with the higher search demand, because your competitors will often be or should be looking at the typical trends of when is best to activate the PPC. At those times, this is when being competitive and present above organic listings is really valuable. So this is where you would want comparatively to put a higher onus on PPC spend rather than SEO.
The takeaways here are, from an SEO perspective, that you should be grouping your keywords so that you can analyze them more appropriately, and then focusing on the problem areas if you were to see ranking drops.
And then from a PPC perspective, support SEO really. It's not one or the other. PPC should be there to fill in the gaps, even if it's short term. But then also have a look at multiple channels, because where we pointed out that there might be higher spend in SEO at the quieter months, we can have lower cost campaigns such as display running to educate that audience in order to have a better conversion journey further on in the user journey. It's rarely linear. You need to be quite reactive with it.
The next step is forming your SEO strategies with your PPC data. So I'll allow David to touch on the PPC data we might use.
So this is this is where PPC really sort of comes into it with much deeper keyword depth typically than we can see with organic. Now, with this side of things, either through the search query reports on activity being run, or if you are running dynamic search ads on either the landing pages or on particular audience types and groupings, you can pull out a lot of the data there from the search terms themselves. But when you're having a look at those, see what's actually working, because a lot of the high volume stuff may not be as efficient as some of the lower ones. We want to have a look at the click-through rates as one example to see what sort of searches are resonating better with the audience, and also, of course, conversion rates. And the conversion rates really are sort of more so the core indicators. So if we know that there are some search terms and we are seeing the same type of search appearing again and again, and it's a growing one, with good conversion rates, this is actually something we might want to move over to SEO. And this is another thing, is the cost too high? It might be a case that those search terms are really good, but the cost of acquisition is massive. So what we would want to do is have SEO support PPC by shifting that focus into SEO, getting those organic ranking, organic listings higher, and then use PPC to sort of pick up any of the slack or any of the competitive side of things. So again, sort of working almost, well, working completely together, but in the other way round from previously said. And then informing SEO with PPC data. So again, SEO takes a little bit of time for the rankings to bed in, but we can pick up that trend data much faster with PPC. Are we seeing a climb? Are we seeing a surge? We can also use content marketing, and this is really where content marketing can help a lot with some of the activity that we run. Where we are seeing this surge appear, it might be a case that SEO may take too long to bed in for that. So really, we then sort of inform the SEO team, this is the sort of content that we would need to get that out there across as many channels as possible to really sort of ride that wave.
Just to clarify, from an SEO perspective, the PPC data that's really useful for us is knowing, obviously, high search volume keywords to know that there's actually a demand. Keywords that are being bid on that get a high click-through rate, we know that they're relevant to what we're trying to achieve. And then most importantly, the keywords that have a high conversion rate, because we know that they're commercially liable, commercially good terms to be targeting with our SEO as well. So another thing you can do with your PPC data is your A/B testing of your ads in order to inform your meta titles. So this is a bit more difficult to do organically. You can do it, but you don't always know exactly what Google's going to show with your meta title description. So if you can A/B test your ads, find out which one has a much better click-through rate or even conversion rate, you can then bring that information across and use it to create your meta titles and descriptions and hopefully boost your click-through rates organically. The key takeaways here are that you should be using keyword level insights from the PPC data in order to inform your SEO strategy, and that you should be A/B testing your messaging within PPC and then rolling that out organically.
And then from the PPC side of things, and this isn't, the first point isn't solely PPC, but effectively it is shifting where efficiency requires it. If it's a question of cost efficiency, or if there is a faster reacting surge in particular terms, we need to shift some of that budget, not all of the budget, but some of that budget dynamically between PPC and SEO to try to keep that balance floating in the right way. And then lastly, inform the PPC strategy from the organic volume. If we are seeing better performance and more volume from certain organic keywords, is there competition on that we need to start bidding on to try to make sure that we are capturing that ahead of the competition? So really, the information needs to work both ways.
So next we're looking at landing page optimization, and again, this is both from an SEO and PPC perspective. From David's side.
Yeah, so for me, for a landing page, really, there are a few things that are sort of completely the core focus for me. One of them is a focused call to action. There is no point in having 50 different calls to actions on a single landing page. It needs to be honed in on that intent for that search term. So really, focused call to action. You don't want to distract people with 100 different possibilities. You just want to give them, this is what you want. Secondly, trust marks. Trust marks on the page. Obviously, a lot of people are offering similar things, similar holidays, similar products and offerings. You need to make sure that you are trustworthy. So having those trust marks there. One of them is to make it sticky. Having, especially in mobile, having a sticky button to either bring someone back to the call to action or to complete that call to action, often at the footer of the page or the base of the page, really makes, when we've tested it, really makes the conversion rates perform much more strongly. And lastly, keep it simple. Nobody wants to read a wall of text. keeping things very direct. This is what we're offering. This is the information you need to know at this point. Here is a clear call to action, and all these people trust us. Those are the efficiencies for paid traffic. We are after intent, so we want to capitalize on that.
From the SEO side of things, we are focusing on the keyword itself, making sure that appears in the right places on the keyword on the page. The content, in terms of what needs to be on that page, what do competitors have, what's going to ensure that the user gets what they need from this page, and what's going to make sure we meet search intent, and then of course the quality, the overall quality of that content and of that page. So, as I mentioned earlier, this is our landing page optimization process at Adido, and everything starts with that keyword research. So we're finding out which keywords the page needs to rank for, and then we're optimizing for them, putting the keyword in all the right places, from URLs, meta titles, descriptions, headers, etc. We then take it a step further from that, and we conduct what is called a term frequency inverse document frequency equation. Essentially, this looks at the top 10 ranking pages for a particular keyword, and it pulls out all of the most commonly used words. What we can do with that is understand a bit more about, okay, what does this page need to be talking about in order to rank on page 1? And that gives us a bit more context to what we need to be writing about on that page. We then look a bit further at the competitors and what they're doing. What have they got on the page? How is it structured? What can we use on ours? We use internal linking on the site to then build up the authority of whichever page it is we're trying to rank higher, and then add additional content to that page from our competitor research and the other research we've done. We then check things over from a technical SEO perspective, make sure it's crawlable, indexable, make sure the right schema's on there, make sure it's fast, make sure it's mobile friendly, all of the above. And then look at the page layout, which is something that's incredibly important to get right. You need to be making sure that whatever meets that search intent is nearer to the top of the page so that the user can find it quickly. So what this process does is that it means, okay, we've got our landing page, fantastic, it has increased our rankings, but not only that, it is also improving quality scores from a paid perspective, because your PPC campaigns can then perform better because they have a better landing page, which is more relevant to the particular keyword you're bidding on. Therefore, the two go hand in hand, and you improve both organically and from a paid perspective.
And to mirror effectively what Tom's saying, when we see those the landing pages perform, the quality score will go up. It also reduces the bid required potentially to appear for those search terms we are targeting. So again, it improves the efficiencies from our side of things and makes it more cost effective to run that PPC.
The key takeaways here are that your page will have a conversion focus from the PPC perspective, which is fantastic, combined with the quality and keyword focus of an SEO campaign. So not only is that great for your rankings and your paid performance, but also for the users themselves, making sure that they get what they want and that they convert.
And then the other 2 points really are trust. Again, especially now with social proofing, trust is more important than ever. So get those reviews and make them visible, whether you are using the star ratings, and ideally star ratings and seller ratings on your ads. That will obviously help the response rates to that. But regarding the actual optimization from a landing page perspective, having those trust marks available makes people sort of puts people at ease to actually convert. The second thing is really to keep that focus. So I know we've already mentioned conversion focus, but having sort of an extra point on focus here, because this is really the key of it, you need to have a singular focus for what you are trying to do. So know your objective, tailor that landing page to that. And then having a look at the competitor behavior. So this is something where PPC really does shine. So from a PPC perspective, we can have a look, and I've mentioned already the auction insights side of things, and here we're looking at sort of Safari terms and Safari competitors. Have a look at where your impression share is. Have a look at where your top of page and absolute top of page are. This will sort of tell you not only where you stand or how visible you are overall, but also how aggressive competition's being. The big one at the end, which is your outrank share, is effectively telling you, again, sort of the level of aggression of the competition. If you are appearing and you've only got, in this instance, let's say that we've got absolute top of page at 46%, why is this? Is it a case that we are not bidding aggressively enough? Or is it a case that the competition is really sort of hiking up the challenge? So understanding where we are and where it's effective for us to be is massively important. We don't want to be bidding on the absolute top if we can't afford it. And just to clarify exactly what I mean by that, because the terms often change, absolute top is right at the top. And then top is anything above the organic listings. Now, ideally, if you want some good visibility, you do want to get some top impression share rather than anything below. If you're going for a more aggressive stance and it's a high intent, high converting search term, you may well want to go for absolute top. But again, bear in mind the cost per acquisition side of things. So what do the auction insights tell you? Well, you've got the impression share and it's a really good starting point. How many more potential impressions could you be seeing? Is it a case that we need to up the budgets to provide a larger impression pool to get more of that good traffic coming through, or not? The top and absolute top, sort of understanding your visibility over organic, and the overlap is how often your competitors appear above you. So really it's sort of trying to understand not only the landscape in itself, but the landscape as is being used by the competitors. And what you can do with that is you can really test things out with your ads. So test things thoroughly. I mean, we use, especially now that expanded text ads are going to be pushed aside, use those responsive search ads now. Start building up. And this is one thing that I would say quite early on. You don't need to fill up all of the headlines and all of the descriptions initially. We want to test things. We want to make sure that it's manageable to get those learnings. So start with the bare minimum of headlines and descriptions. See what's working, then build into it. So continuously test. And then secondly, try to dominate as much of the landscape as you can with extensions, whether it's the call outs, the reviews, site links, pricing. All of these things can help, especially when you're an absolute top, push down the competition. You want to try to make sure that you've got as much of that visibility as possible.
From the SEO side of things, it's about tracking your competitors. Your competitors are anyone who is outranking you organically for your desired keywords. And like I say, you need to be tracking them. So we use SEMrush and we can look at, okay, this is where we rank and these are our top 4 or 5 competitors. Where are they? So once you identify a keyword, in this case, I'm using Serengeti safaris, that you want to rank for, you can see that which competitors are outranking you. So safari bookings outrank the client. The first thing you want to do is look in the SERP itself and see what opportunities there are. So this is where you'll understand, okay, what do we need to be including on the page to try and get some added visibility? And from what we can see here, we can see star ratings pulling through from our competitor. We can also see that people also ask rich snippet area, which means that maybe we should be having FAQs on the page so we can try and get added visibility there. But when we look at that top ranking competitor, it's always good to go on their site and start to understand why they rank #1 for that keyword. What have they done? So for these guys with Safari bookings, you can see that they've got breadcrumbs, which shows really great site architecture, helps with your internal linking. They've got an optimized H1 towards the keyword. They've got a good, nice little chunk of intro text in there. It's not too intrusive, but it's well optimized. They have their reviews and their review stars pulling through. And then Safari packages, which is probably one of the most important things on this page in terms of meeting that search intent, because people are looking for Serengeti safaris. There they are. And further down the page, you'll see that they've got FAQ content as well. So this is really important for you to understand, okay, what am I missing here that I can then do on my own site? We also use a tool called Screamingfrog to crawl the site, which helps us to understand well, a lot of different things, but one of those things is the relationship between different pages. So for this page itself, you can have a look at how many internal links there are to that page, where they're linking from, what the anchor text is, so that you can get to understand the kind of architecture you need to build around your own page. Do they have a lot of blog content linking to that page? If so, perhaps you need a content marketing strategy around that keyword if you're going to have any chance of ranking. You can also look at the backlink profile for that particular page. Use a tool called MAJESTIC to do this. And it just kind of gives you an idea of, okay, have they made a concerted effort to build links to that page? They had in this instance, so it kind of indicates that actually if we want to build the authority of this page, we might need to look at where we can build some internal link, build some backlinks to the page. And you can download your competitor's backlink profile to see who links to them, and then perhaps approach those publications because they might be more willing to strike up a relationship with you. And then when we're looking at the schema on that particular competitor page, you can use Google's structured data testing tool. There is a newer tool to use that I don't yet use because I'm stuck in my old ways, but this is one of the tools you can use to understand the schema they've got on that page. So they're actually using product schema, which isn't really the most relevant schema they could be using. So I believe there is tourist destination schema or similar that you could use, but for them it's working because it is putting through those review stars. So it could be something worth testing on your site just to understand whether it does the same thing for you or not. The key takeaways in this area are about, from an SEO perspective, tracking your competitor rankings so you can see the movements, when are they beating you, when aren't they beating you, and then dig into that a bit deeper with your deep dive page evaluation, and then use those learnings to make real changes on your own site.
And then from the paid side of things, the first thing really is to have a look at auction insights. This will give you the best insight into competitive behavior, not just in terms of their aggression, but the impact potentially to your bid strategies. The other thing to bear in mind is that you can also track the way that competitors are potentially growing. Are we seeing the same competitor month after month increasing their impression share? Is this something that we need to be aware of to position ourselves slightly differently? And then lastly, much in the same way that you might want to look at a competing site from an SEO perspective, have a look at the competitor ads. What are they saying? Often you'll see the ads say the same thing from the different companies, all of them offering more or less the same. What can you say to stand out? I think positioning makes a massive difference, but the right copy will really, really improve the click-through rate and as such the click share. And all of this can really sort of go towards that quality score and again, improve overall efficiencies. And then this last section over here, which is about building consumer confidence. I've mentioned trust marks already. But yeah, make sure the ads are trustworthy. This will really, really help not only with the click-through rate side of things and the response rates, but also in terms of the conversion rates. You want people to be comfortable clicking on your ad and then comfortable once they arrive. One of the things to point out is you need to mirror to a certain extent what you are saying in the ad as you are saying on the landing page itself. So if you have ATOL protected, as an example here, make sure that's just as visible with those trust marks on the landing page. So you need to keep that trustworthiness going throughout. Otherwise, it can be quite jarring and actually counterproductive. So we've got different examples here of certain trust marks being visible. And then over here is more of the social proofing side of things. So you've got, 90% would book again. There are real reviews. You've got the star ratings and the seller ratings from, in this instance, TripAdvisor. All of these things really do help push things in front of the audience. The other thing, especially with the seller ratings and the star ratings, is that change in color can draw the eye. So if you have got a load of competitors that have not got this and you are showing that, that will be a massive boost to your potential click-through rate, which others won't have seen.
And from the SEO side of things, it's kind of mirroring what David's doing in terms of trying to put that message of trust out there. And this is where your content marketing can change. So as we've obviously seen with the pandemic, people are a bit more worried about booking holidays. They don't know where's safe to travel. So your content marketing is going to focus on where the safe travel zones are, what you can still do in particular locations, and then even having content around areas you probably wouldn't normally talk about because they're a bit more dull and not very exciting, but they're what people care about now, which is your insurance and guarantees. So making sure that your content is mirroring the environment that you're in, and then pushing that out through an outreach strategy can mean that you're then aligning yourself with trusted publications. So your users may not have heard of you before, but they have heard of other publications in your industry. So if you're getting featured on those publications, that's building the trust and saying, okay, these guys are partnered, we can go with them. And the same with your ads is the same with your organic listings. If you can have those review ratings in the SERP, then that's going to really build confidence and improve those click-through rates straight away. So this is something that you need to be concentrating on, having your schema set up properly to ensure that you're doing everything you can to pull these review stars through. So the key takeaways here are that you should be using your content marketing to push that message out a bit further. You can then use that content within email campaigns, social campaigns, and just really drill the message home. And partner with trusted sites within your outreach campaigns.
And then for PPC side of things, and I appreciate that I'm focusing almost exclusively on search, but the same thing can be done with display, making sure that you've got those trust marks either in the creative or if you are using responsive display ads, making sure you've got those trust marks within the copy. So having that available, that guarantees the protection, sort of really encourage people to click on the ads and also see what resonates best with which audience. And then lastly on that, to push those extensions. It does have a massive impact. So making sure that you've got as much of the landscape as possible. And even if it's a case that you are using your site links purely from the perspective that you don't expect people to click on the site links, but you want to show that you've got a whole page dedicated to reviews and feedback, that you are confident enough to actually position that at the forefront, will really help your overall click-through rates potentially for those ads. So again, being not only trying to encourage consumer confidence, but showing that you have the confidence in yourself and what you are offering will really still translate through to better performance.
So a massive amount to think about there in terms of how you can use SEO or PPC, or ideally both, to push your business in 2021. We are always interested in feedback from people who watch our webinars. I'll give a big virtual round of applause to Tom and David for their brilliant presentation. If you have any questions for either of them, you can leave comments on the channel you're watching this right now. So please make sure to do so. We're always happy to hear what people are struggling with, need help with, and need more expert advice. So please make sure to do that, and we'll see you again very, very soon. Thanks a lot.